Hi, this is Rudy Jones of PalmettoStateBaseball.com. Welcome to the Palmetto State Baseball Podcast for June 3rd, 2024. This podcast is a part of my coverage of college baseball in South Carolina. All for schedules, scores, rankings, and other news about all 33 teams in the state of South Carolina at PalmettoStateBaseball.com. I'm also active on X, formerly known as Twitter, at the handle of Palmetto Base. Please drop me an email at rudyjones@PalmettoStateBaseball.com or send me a message on X with comments, compliments, or criticisms. Listener interaction helps me know what I need to do better, or at least differently. If you like my coverage of college baseball in South Carolina and this podcast, please tell your baseball fan friends about it and encourage them to like it too. Instead of a sponsor, I use a little time each podcast to talk about the church where I serve the Lord. I invite you to worship with me at Reedy River Baptist Church on US 25 between Travelers Rest and the Furman University Golf Course in Granville County. Worship time is at 10:30 on Sunday mornings. We have other worship services during the week, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and we would love to have you come worship with us. I hope you would find that we are a friendly church. One thing before we get on to the regular portion of the podcast, I'd like to wish my wife, Doris Jones, a happy anniversary. We had our 50th wedding anniversary on June the 1st. Can you believe that? She has been very patient with me, allowing me to pursue my passion about college baseball at PalmettoStateBaseball.com and through this podcast. Has she ever thought about divorcing me? I don't think so. Murder, maybe 2 or 3 times. Now on to the week's news. The 3 big news items out of the state, of course, are Clemson getting to the Super Regional, the end of the Gary Gilmore era at Coastal Carolina, and South Carolina closing the door on Mark Kingston era. We'll start with Clemson. Tigers fans have been itching to get beyond the regional round of the NCAA tournament since 2010. The lack of success doing that almost certainly played in the role in the departures of both Jack Leggett and Monty Lee as head coaches. Second-year coach Eric Bakich broke through that glass ceiling over the weekend. The reward is a home date against Florida in the Super Regional. That's the best two out of 3 Super Regional. The Gators, of course, are coached by former Clemson assistant Kevin O'Sullivan, who was on staff with Bakich there for a while under the Jack Leggett, and the third assistant was Tim Corbin. Entering the regional, Bakich called for Clemson fans to create a raucous atmosphere at Doug Kingsmore Stadium, and Tiger Nation came through. I'm sure it'll be more of the same over this next weekend as they move within 2 wins of going to the College World Series for the first time since 2010. The Tigers have a phenomenal 1-2 punch in starting pitchers Aiden Kanak and Tristan Smith. They've got offensive threats up and down the batting order. Jacob Hinderleiter on Saturday became the first Clemson player to get 5 hits in an NCAA playoff game since Khalil Green did it in 2002. That is pretty stout company. Clemson won its 2010 Super Regional and ultimately finished 3rd in the College World Series that season. Tigers fans are anxious to see what Charles Schwab Field looks like in person. They'd love to go. 2 of Clemson's wins over the weekend came at the expense of Coastal Carolina. Clemson and Coastal had both scheduled meetings during the regular season rained out, but the luck of the NCAA draw pairing led to 2 more meetings anyway for the season. Those 2 losses by Coastal to Clemson signaled the end for longtime Chants coach Gary Gilmore, who announced last year he would be retiring after this season. He coached the Chants to the Chanticleers to the 2016 College World Series, and he said over the weekend that the uniting of Clemson and USC fans to cheer for Coastal during that title run would be a special memory for him. Of course, he also had a lot of other special memories, a bunch of conference championships, NCAA appearances, and 1,369 wins between Coastal and USC Aiken. And Coach Gilmore has coached the last few years while he's been battling cancer. And the last time I checked with someone at Coastal, he seemed to be doing okay. Of course, they're keeping a steady check on it. And I hope that he is able to enjoy his time of retirement for many, many years. One thing that Coach Gilmore said after the end of his career, he did, of course, talk about all the special players he's had, but he said he won't miss anything about dealing with the NIL issues, name, image, and likeness issues, because they're making it more difficult for schools such as Coastal and even others to be able to compete. Don't have to worry about that on a beach somewhere, Coach. Enjoy the retirement. On to Kingston. USC AD Ray Tanner announced the decision shortly before 11 a.m. Monday, and John Whittle of thebigspur.com was the first to report the story. Kingston had a 217 and 155 record in 7 seasons at Carolina. His final USC team was 37 and 25, including a 1-2 record in the NCAA Raleigh Regional. The season ended with a listless offensive performance and a 2-0 loss to James Madison on Sunday. In 6 full seasons, of course the 2020 season was stopped short because of COVID-19, Kingston's teams had 2 super regional trips and 2 more trips to regionals. But he also coached the school's first losing season since 1996. That's a year before Ray Tanner got there. Putting aside my neutrality for a moment, and at least I try to be neutral in my coverage on this website and podcast, as a South Carolina graduate, I think it was time for a change. I will say that to the best of my knowledge, Coach Kingston ran a clean program, and I can't remember any off-field incidents where players embarrassed the program or the school. He should be commended for that. But his absolute devotion to metrics and analytics really bugged me. I recall watching the Sunday loss to Kennesaw State earlier in the season. Carolina players hit 3 or 4 fly balls early in the game that were knocked down by strong incoming winds at Founders Park. After the game, Kingston said the launch angle and exit velocity indicated those balls should have been home run. Well, winds can be unpredictable, much like so many aspects of baseball. Don't rely on analytics, rely on what you see. A former minor league hitting coach told me he didn't like the way analytics has risen to gospel-like status about hitting. He said he likes hitting the ball where it's pitched and taking level swings instead of going for the fences. That going for the fences, chicks dig the long ball attitude has got players going all out on all levels. USC players struck out 617 times in 62 games this season. That's 9.95 strikeouts per game. Do you know that how many times the 2011 National Championship Gamecocks struck out? 69 games, they struck out 402 times. That's an average of 5.83 per game. So that's an average of about 4 more strikeouts per game in 2024 versus 2011. So if you figure a 250 team putting the ball in play 4 more times is going to get at least 1 more hit a game. How many times were the Gamecocks 1 hit away? Even with the struggles they've had, USC entered the final 2 weeks of the season still being considered for a regional host spot. A home series with Georgia and a road series with number 1 Tennessee remained. USC lost all 6 games. But a telling part about the program's status was the apathy from Carolina fans entering that Georgia series. USC had to offer discounted tickets in an effort to get a sellout for those 3 games. It didn't work. Just folks had apparently given up on the program under Coach Kingston. I personally thought USC played itself out of an NCAA tournament bid with that 6-game losing streak. I've gone most of the SEC tournaments over the past 23 years, but the prospect of one and done didn't justify the expense this season. I don't make any money off PalmettoStateBaseball.com, so I just didn't see burning a few $100s to go down there for one day. Of course, as it turns out, the Gamecocks went 3-2 in the SEC tournament. They got to the semifinals, and I think that may quite likely have moved them back off the bubble and into the tournament. But the Gamecocks went 1-2 in the Raleigh Regional. They needed a 9th-inning miracle to reach extra innings and get that lone win over James Madison. As you recall, they were down by 2 runs, and Cole Messina got a 2-out home run. In the rematch against James Madison, after a loss to NC State, USC made multiple errors from a fundamental standpoint and failed to score against a team with a staff earned run average north of 6. Poor fundamentals, leaky defense, and the lack of defined roles for the pitching staff were other criticisms of Kingston. How does a pitcher prepare mentally if he's a Friday starter one weekend and in the bullpen the next? Another fan criticism of Kingston was Kingston's lack of involvement with the greater USC community. While it likely was not part of his job description, I don't remember Kingston getting much notice at other sporting events involving USC teams. Compare that to women's basketball coach Dawn Staley and football coach Shane Beamer and their presence at other USC sporting events. Now, maybe that's just part of Coach Kingston's personality. I talked to a longtime coach, not a Division I coach, who recalled being in a baseball function with Kingston and that Kingston had almost no interaction with him. Watch the emotion Clemson's players had while playing during this past season and compare that with USC's. Tigers coach Eric Bakich climbed the right field fence to celebrate with the Cajun Cafe patrons after Sunday night's regional win. Could you picture Mark Kingston doing that or something similar at Founders Park? Meanwhile, assistant head coach Monty Lee will serve as interim head coach at USC until a replacement is named. Kendall Rogers of D1Baseball.com reports Kingston is likely to be a candidate for the vacancy at South Florida. That's the school he left for USC. South Florida parted ways with head coach Billy Mole last month after 7 seasons. Rogers also posted on X that USC might need to do some work to keep one of the key players on the roster. Without naming any players, that's obviously a reference to Ethan Petrie. Petrie might elsewhere after Kingston's departure. He's from Florida and was recruited from Kingston. And I'm sure that NIL money may be coming from Florida State or Florida or wherever down there who would like to get him. It doesn't have to be in Florida for that matter. But keeping Petrie on the team will be one of the major tasks for the next coach. Social media speculation about Kingston's successors is abounding with names. They've included Duke coach Chris Pollard, East Carolina coach Cliff Godwin, Campbell coach Justin Hare, and, of course, Monty Lee, who's serving as the interim coach, and he had winning programs at Clemson and College of Charleston. My question is, since Lee served as hitting coach under Kingston, will the outrageous number of strikeouts during his tenure hurt his chances? There's also been social media speculation that Lee might be a candidate to fill the vacancy at the Citadel. Other candidates included Mississippi State coach Chris Lemonis, a South Carolina native and a former Citadel player. He was catching some heat early in the season before the Bulldogs turned things around. One of his top players, by the way, was David Mershon, a player out of Taylor's. How about USC Upstate coach Mike McGuire? He's a former USC shortstop. Sorry for that brief break. I had a little bit of a throat issue. Other candidates to replace Kingston that have been thrown out there. Nova Southeastern coach Adrian Morales. He was the leader of USC's 2010 and 11 national championship teams. He had a reputation of being a fiery competitor, something that could be good for some teams. I remember when I was covering the Greenville Braves back in the 1980s, that's the Atlanta Braves AA team at the time, they had an infielder named Tommy Thompson. He was something of a journeyman, but he was not afraid to confront teammates, even if they were big-time major league prospects, if he felt like they weren't playing as they should. Thompson went on to a career as a minor league manager. Morales had that same type of attitude, I believe. He went 28-18 in his first season at NCAA Division II North Southeastern after several successful seasons on the junior college level. Would a firebrand coach go over at USC? Now, I know he's going to be a long shot because Carolina fans, I don't think, would want to bring in a Division II coach. Speaking of that, there is North Greenville coach Landon Powell. He won a Division II championship at North Greenville, and he was on 3 USC College World Series teams in 2002-2004. In fact, I think he was named to the catcher on the all-time College World Series team. Other names, Wake Forest coach Tom Walter. Then there have been some assistant coaches at other successful programs like Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU have been championed by some fans. We'll just have to wait and see which direction Coach Tanner goes in. There was other news on the coaching front in South Carolina today. Charleston Southern parted ways with Mark McMillan after 4 seasons and an 86-116 record. The Buccaneers did not have a winning season under McMillan, but they did reach the Big South Conference tournament twice in their last 3 seasons, including a 4th-place finish in 2024 when only the top 4 teams went to the tournament. Just speculating, would Charleston Southern alum and former coach Stuart Lake consider return to the field? He's had 2 stints as an assistant at USC. He's currently working in the USC Athletic Department, and he's also the analyst for USC radio broadcast. He was the coach for the Buccaneers' last winning season in 2014. He coached the team to a 30-26 record. Now, as it turns out, many of those wins were vacated because of athletic department-wide NCAA violations as caused by, as determined by the NCAA. I have no idea of if or how much Coach Slake was involved in that, but it seemed to be athletic department-wide and not specifically baseball. Anyway, taking away that win, that winning season, which the NCAA did, of course, Charleston Southern's last winning season was in 1996 when it went 30-24-1 under Randy Mazey. 5 of the state's 10 Division I programs will have new coaches next season. Kevin Schnall has already been named as Gilmore's replacement at Coastal, while Charleston Southern, the Citadel, USC, and Winthrop vacancies remain to be filled. Francis Marion on the Division II level did name a replacement for the retired Art Inhabitant. The Patriots are going with Jeff Jefferson, an assistant on a successful UNC Pembroke program. In other news last week, Florence Darlington Tech finished with a 3-2 record at the NCAA World Series in Grand Junction, Colorado. It's its deepest run there and 3 trips to the JUCO World Series. Outside the state, there was some news regarding 4 former Clemson players who are now coaches. Randy Mazie, as I mentioned earlier, he's gotten West Virginia into the Super Regional round where they'll be playing at North Carolina. The Mountaineers won the Tucson Regional. Macy, who like Gilmore has announced he's retiring after this season, also served as an assistant coach at Clemson and, as I mentioned before, head coach at Charleston Southern and at East Carolina. Bradley Lecroy's Virginia Commonwealth Rams went 1-2 in the Greenville, North Carolina Regional. He's an upstate native, and he played and served as an assistant coach at Clemson. Former Tiger Robbie Allen's Brunswick Community College Dolphins, that are out of coastal North Carolina, finished runner-up to LSU Eunice in the NCAA Division II World Series. On Monday, LaSalle University announced it is reinstating its baseball program that it had dropped because of COVID in 2021, and that former coach David Miller would be returning. Miller is a former Clemson standout. Most recently, Miller was at Manhattan for the past 2 seasons, and one of his assistants was Scott Wingo of South Carolina fame. No immediate word as to whether Wingo would follow him. LaSalle, which is in Philadelphia, will be reinstating baseball in 2026. Lastly, I want to mention Birmingham Southern's baseball team. Birmingham Southern was founded more than 100 years ago, but the small school's recent financial issues led to the school announcing in March that it would close its doors May 31st. Well, the Panthers baseball team qualified for the Division III World Series and played its first game on that day that the school closed, May 31st. The Panthers lost that opener. Down to their last out in an elimination game on Saturday, the Panthers prolonged their existence with a walk-off homer. Unfortunately, what goes around comes around. A walk-off homer on Sunday ended the Cinderella run for the Panthers that next day. Former Birmingham Southern Panthers players were invited onto the field to join the current team for one last celebration. And how many people would opt for a bus ride over a plane trip these days? Well, Birmingham Southern's players did. They got a long bus ride home instead of a flight because they wanted to enjoy a little bit more time as a team. Hey, it just hit me as I was typing this. Maybe Furman could revive its baseball program and bring in a ready-made team in Birmingham Southern. Nah, Furman would never do it. Elsewhere, I named Clemson as Palmetto State Baseball Team of the Week for May 27th through June 2nd for its regional championship. I also give a special shout-out to Wofford for doing well in the Chapel Hill Regional. They went 1-2, including the school's first-ever NCAA baseball regional win. Good for Wofford and first-year coach J.J. Edwards. I put out a new podcast every Monday during the season. I don't know how much further I will go, hopefully maybe at least one more week. If you enjoy my podcast and my other coverage of college baseball in South Carolina, please tell your baseball friends about it, baseball fan friends. You can email compliments, criticisms, or comments to me at rudyjones@palmettostatebaseball.com. I want your input to help my coverage of the best level of the greatest sport God ever allowed to be invented to be the best it can be. As a reminder, I'd love for you to come worship with me at Reedy River Baptist Church, 871 North 25 Bypass, between Travelers Rest and the Furman University Golf Course in the Granville County area. Worship time is at 10:30 on Sunday mornings. I hope you will find that we are a friendly church and will want to worship with us regularly. Thanks again for listening to the June 3rd, 2024 episode of the Palmetto State Baseball Podcast. This is Rudy Jones of PalmettoStateBaseball.com saying, it's a beautiful day for baseball. Let's play too.